Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. The Lord has given me another dream, and I've prayed, and I believe I must share this with you. Again, it concerns the fact that the rapture and the ensuing disastrous events that are coming on this world are so close. And if you don't know what that is, please stay with me and I will explain. So the dream had two parts, and the first part was as follows. I was a student and I had completed my studies, and I was in my student flat, my apartment, and I was all ready to move out. All of my furniture was gone and I was just left with this empty, dingy flat. And this, I have to say, is a repeat of a dream scenario that I had a year or so ago when I was a student. I'd completed my studies, I was in this small flat, all my furniture was gone and I was ready to move out. And when God says something twice, that means it is certain and it is fixed. So now that all my furniture had gone, I could see the true state of my flat, of my apartment, and it was absolutely dreadful. It was this kind of dark, dingy, dismal, oppressive atmosphere. It was darker than this, and the carpet was this kind of greeny colour, bluey, greeny, dark colour, just like in the picture. And the carpet was very, very old and worn, and was only what was left of it was only a couple of millimetres thick, and it was actually mostly worn away, revealing the ground underneath. And the ground was so, as it were, coming up through the carpet as it was so worn away, and it looked just like this. It was kind of concretey, tarmacy, lumpy, rough ground. In fact, I ran my foot over it, over these gaps in the carpet and this ground that was coming up, because I was so shocked at what I was seeing. The walls were covered in graffiti, and I thought to myself, whoever comes to live here after me, they are going to have to completely renew this place, completely. So all this became visible once all the furniture, everything that I owned was removed, and basically the apartment was uninhabitable. So I'm going to explain the meaning of part one first before I move on to part two. So the student flat that I was in represents the world that we are living in. Being in this world is actually just a time of preparation for what comes after our time here now. I had completed my studies, I had as it were graduated, and I was ready to leave. All the furniture being gone showed how imminent my departure was. This shows that I am done with this world and I'm ready for the imminent departure, the imminent rapture. Once the furniture's gone, when you're moving house, you quickly follow it. When you move house, soon after, if not simultaneously, you don't hang around. So the furniture represents everything that we have, that we need in this time, in this world, to live a godly life, and that was all gone. And with that being gone, I could see the world, there I am, ready for departure, and I could see the world exactly for what it is now that my furniture was gone, because there was nothing left to obscure it. That was what it looked like. That was the true reality. So the carpet represented a sort of thin veneer or covering that's hiding the true reality beneath. But now that the furniture's gone, I could see what was literally coming up through the ground. And this represents the powers of hell becoming manifest now that nothing is left to hold them back or to obscure the forces that are really at work in this world that we live in. As they come up through the ground below. Then I remembered the graffiti on the walls, and I said out loud to myself, because I was praying about this and I was musing over what that meant, and I said out loud to myself, what does the graffiti mean? And immediately the Lord spoke to me so clearly, and he said, the writing is on the wall. Now, I don't know if you know that expression, but it comes from the story of Belshazzar. He was a king of Babylon in the book of Daniel. You need to read the entirety of chapter 5. The meaning comes from the story of this Babylonian king, and he had taken the vessels that had been plundered from God's temple in Jerusalem, and he profaned them. and the writing that appeared on the wall, because this hand appeared out of nowhere and began writing on the wall. It was written, and the meaning of the words that were written on the wall were, "You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting." In other words, you have been tested and failed the test. You now face judgment. And he died on that night. So the overall meaning of this first part of the dream is as follows, namely that the rapture or the catching away of faithful believers is as imminent as a house move where the furniture removers have already taken away the furniture and all that is left is for the people to physically leave the place. The state of the world shows that with the believers gone, the true nature of those in control, i.e. the demonic rulers of this world, both spiritual and their puppets who've sold out to them, the Illuminati, the world leaders, these are going to be manifest and taking charge with no one and nothing to hold them back. God has looked upon this world system and those in charge, both spiritual and human, and he has said, "You have been judged, and judgment will follow swiftly." And remember, this has been twice now that I've seen this scenario, so it is fixed. This will come upon the world in the form of wars, of more pestilences, not just COVID, economic collapse, physical upheavals in the earth, and so forth. And the enemy will make use of this to control people. We've already been prepared for this by years of predictive programming and by this current situation, which has resulted in the removal of many of our rights during the current pandemic. And he will enforce what's called the mark of the beast to track and control. And what's coming is worse than anything that has ever been seen before. The fact that I thought in this dream that the only thing that could be done was to completely renew the flat is a reference to the new heaven and the new earth that God says that he will make when all of this is over. And to know about that, you need to read Revelation chapter 21. Now, as for part 2 of the dream, in this dream I was with somebody who I love very, very much, who is very dear to me. This person has walked away from the Lord. So we were talking to an estate agent, and the person I was with, because they were looking for somewhere to live, they wanted to get their own place. He was looking at the estate agent's home and he thought that it was quite nice and would do for him. In other words, he wanted something like she had. It was a small 1-bedroom apartment, and it was in a rather rough neighbourhood, like a council flat or like social housing. The estate agent had tried to make this place nice, but I could see it for what it was, which was really not very nice at all. But the person who I was with seemed very happy and contented with this, and contented with the idea of buying a place like this. And I remember so clearly the cost of this flat, this apartment. It was £210,000, which is like about $260,000. And I remember saying that was very expensive for what it was. And I pointed out that if he bought this, it would cost him all of his inheritance. Nevertheless, in spite of my warnings, he was happy to go ahead and spend everything he had on a little dingy flat like this. Now, as for the meaning of part 2, the message here is a really stark one, but I have to say there is hope. The dream signifies someone choosing to make this world their home, investing their life and their future and everything that they have in this life and this world. And whereas I was preparing to leave, see dream part 1, in contrast, this person had chosen to invest in and make a home here. The meaning is clear. Staying here and making this choice will cost you everything you have. It will cost you your entire inheritance. Everything, in fact, that the Lord has wanted to give you, every good thing that he's wanted to give you, that will be the cost. And it will be a high, high price for very, very little, and it won't be worth it. In the dream, I was extremely sad and heartbroken because the person I was with would not listen to my warnings. Numbers in dreams are always very important and very significant. God speaks through numbers as well as images. So I looked into this, and the number 1000 always means the completely finished fullness, the lot. So here you can see it means immensity, fullness of quantity or multitude, and numbers 10 and its multiples, 10, 100, 1000, often illustrate the fullness of whatever is in view. And obviously the greater the multiplication of 10, the stronger and the more powerful the meaning. The only reference I could find to 210 as such was loss of a leader. And 210, of course, is swiftly followed by 211, and that means every man for himself. So this indicates the loss of, an ensuing anarchy, effectively, doesn't it? During the crises that are to come, we will lose leadership. It will become every man for himself. And that will leave a vacuum for somebody to step in and take control. But as I was looking at this, the Lord then spoke to me again clearly and said, look up 21, as in 210 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So I did, and remember that the zeros, the multiplication of 10 intensifies this over and over and over again. So this is 21 multiplied, or to the power of 4. So I did, and 21 symbolizes great wickedness, sin, rebellion, and the judgment that comes upon this, or distress. So it indicates that what is coming is a time of great wickedness, distress, rebellion, and God's judgment. The number is linked specifically to the time of what is called Jacob's trouble, or Jacob's distress, which occurs in the 7-year tribulation, which will follow the rapture of the believers. This indicates that this is the cost and the price of choosing to stay and buy into the world system as your home, instead of preparing to leave and experience. You will experience the fullness of the time of Jacob's trouble. So here we see about Jacob's trouble. Distress, that then is the meaning of the number 21 that is used in Scripture. The Hebrew word, remember this was compounded again and again and again by the fact that it was 21,0,0,0,0. That's interesting. Sorry, I've just had a thought. This reminds me of something that a sister, Blue Heaven, she's had this many times, which was 21,0 America. Wow, that's just come to me. Anyway, the Hebrew word for distress or trouble, tzara, is used in Jeremiah 30, verse 7, where it speaks of the time of Jacob's distress, or the time of Jacob's trouble. So I do not know how to warn strongly enough not to make the choice to reject God, his forgiveness, his salvation, his promised way of escape, and to actively choose to remain here during what is coming. It will be the worst possible decision. You don't have to choose this. There is a way out. So please make the right choice now. However, I have to say, if you do choose to stay and you do then regret it, which I believe you will, or if you, when you see this video, the rapture has already happened and you've been left behind, I want to tell you there is hope and good news in this. You can still be saved and delivered if you give yourself over to God completely, because he loves you so much. You can be saved and delivered if you give yourself over to him completely. So these are the positive attitudes that are associated with the number 21. Oh, I beg your pardon, I've gone the wrong way. Sorry. So 21 is used in terms of, when it's used in terms of time, as in a 21-year period, is the number of trouble or distress, tzara, during which time we are in need of God's strength, offered by an open hand. When it is used as a number in itself, it speaks of the end of distress. Thus, it speaks of the blessings that come at the end of the distress, and you can choose that. Sin is always the cause of distress, because God brings distress in order to teach people, the consequences of their sin. Yet 21 is also the number signifying the end of distress. Jacob's time of distress ended after 21 years. At the end of this distress, he went to Bethel, which means the house of God, and called on the name of the Lord. This is what you need to do. Likewise, the 21st time that Abraham is mentioned in the Bible is when he returned to Bethel, so returning to the house of God after being in distress in Egypt, which symbolizes the world. And verse 4 again says there, he called on the name of the Lord. This is what you need to do. Joseph in the Bible was 39 when he revealed to his father that he was alive and well. From Jacob's point of view, this was 21 year of time of mental distress, thinking that his son had been killed and lost forever. We should also keep in mind that a big part of the distress was wondering how the promise of God could have failed. God's promises never fail, because Joseph was the holder of the birthright. Yet the time of distress ended happily, and the promise of God was fulfilled in the end. Thus ended Jacob's 21 year of the time of distress. God's promises will not fail, and there is a way out. There is an end to this time of distress, literally this time of being part of Jacob's trouble, if you will go to the house of God, if you will call upon God. I appreciate that for some of you who don't know about these things or who are hearing about them for the first time, this will not make much sense. So if you do know about these things, please bear with me while I explain a little bit for the sake of those who do not. I would say that Bible prophecy is complicated and often disagreed upon, especially with regard to what are called end times. Put very, very briefly, as best I can for the purposes of this video, God has given mankind a certain amount of time on this earth, during which time every person has the chance to choose to seek a relationship with him or go their own way. I will come back to explain this later. Because the majority of people choose to live for themselves, the earth is full of greed and selfishness, leading to war, murder, and all other evils imaginable. God will not permit this to go on forever, which is why he has given us a clear amount of time after which time will be called. The Bible teaches that we know that we are reaching this end time by the signs of the times that we see. These are typified by wars, pestilences, famines, etc. For example, in Matthew 24. I won't read all of these scriptures for the sake of time, but you can pause the video and read them for yourself. Now, these things may have happened throughout history, but we are the only generation that are experiencing all of these things simultaneously, and especially with the current magnitude and level of incidence. In this scripture, Jesus is speaking in answer to his disciples who had asked him the questions of what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age. So he's speaking in this case, in this section of Matthew, specifically to the Jewish people, but it has relevance for those of us who are not Jewish, so please listen. So here he makes reference to what is called this time of Jacob's trouble, the main purpose of which is to wake the Jewish people up to the fact that they have missed their Messiah, Jesus, Yeshua, so that they can be saved. So he's discussing what that will look like here. And these are the times that are coming now, or very shortly. He speaks of this great tribulation. You can see the great tribulation. He says, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever will be again. And unless the days be shortened, no flesh shall be saved. So he speaks of this, and he references Daniel chapter 9. Where again, the angel is speaking to Daniel, and he says, your people, which is the Jewish people, for your holy city, which is Jerusalem. So it was specifically referencing and with the purpose of waking up the Jewish people. We don't have to actually be here. This is something that Christians are not meant to go through, or anybody. I don't just mean Christians versus Jewish people. I mean Jewish people who have received their Messiah, Messianic believers. This refers to anybody who is grafted into the body of Christ, into the body of believers in Jesus, the Christ, Yeshua, the Mashiach, the Bible. So we're not supposed to go through this. But at the moment, the Jewish people, their eyes are blinded. They don't, for the most part, realize that they have missed their Messiah, Yeshua, who came 2,000 years ago for them and for us. So amongst the signs that Jesus speaks of is a reference to the fig tree, and the fig tree always references Israel. It's a metaphor for Israel. And it speaks of the fact that this generation will not pass away. And what this means is Israel is the fig tree, and I beg your pardon. And Israel, as you know, became a nation after 2,000 years of not being a nation, 2,000 years of diaspora in 1948. Jesus says that this, I beg your pardon, that this, in Matthew 24, he says that this nation, this generation, I beg your pardon, will not pass away until all these things come about. So Israel became a nation again in 1948, and a generation, according to Psalm 90, is 70 to 80 years. And this time, well, 70 years was up in 2018 or 2019. So we are, and we're still, the 80 years are not yet up. So this generation, the fig tree generation, is not up yet. We will not pass away. This generation of 70 to 80 years since 1948 will not pass away without these things coming to pass. So we are right here in this generation. So what happens in this so-called 70th week of Daniel, which is the last 7 years prophesied in Daniel 9, chapter 9, verse 27, is the rise of someone who will take control in a chaotic and destabilized world, eventually forcing everyone to take a mark. Here we are again talking about I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, I missed this bit. This again is talking about Jacob's trouble, and here this speaks of the parable of the fig tree and the generation surely not passing away. So in Revelation, it speaks of this person who will take control of this chaotic and destabilized world, and eventually will force everyone to take a mark in order to be able to function economically. And he will ultimately demand worship from all. This is spoken of throughout the latter chapters of Daniel, and of course in these chapters of Revelation, which I've just put on the screen now. So I would warn everyone to extreme caution with regard to taking any mandatory vaccines that might be brought in. There's been plenty of talk about this on YouTube, including some references I've made to this in past videos. Anything that's enforced, it could be vaccines or chips or tracking systems, hydrogels, so forth, especially in the hand or in the forehead. Please, I implore you, exercise extreme caution before you accept this. The consequences of accepting the so-called mark of the beast, whatever that actually does turn out to be in the end, are that you will lose your soul for eternity. There is no way back. And we see this in Revelation 14, verses 9 to 11. So you can read that for yourself. Once again, the fact that this technology is available now as it never has been before is another very clear indicator of where we are in history. However, God is not going to allow those who love him and trust him and have been saved and committed their lives to him to go through this time of torment and judgment. He's not going to just sell us out to the Antichrist, as he is called. So he promises to snatch away those who have dedicated their lives to him. This is called the Rapture, or the harpazo in the original Greek. And we read about this in Thessalonians, where it says here that we shall not all die, but the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. We'll see him in the clouds. And we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with those who are resurrected in the clouds to meet them and the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. And also in 1 Corinthians, behold, I tell you a mystery, we shall not all sleep or die, but we shall all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So those of us who are still here now at this time. So there are different views on the timing of this, but over the years, I personally, I've been a Christian for very many years. I've been looking at end times since I was 16, and I'm nearly 60 years old now. And not that means that I have got everything right, but I'm not new to this. I have explored this thoroughly for a very long time. So my personal view is that I've become convinced of is that the faithful believers will be caught away before this terrible time comes. I'm not going to go into that in great detail now, but these scriptures encourage us to think of it this way. In Revelation 3:10, Jesus says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. And also Luke 21:36 says, watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. There's much more to this, but this is just, I'm trying to be brief. So this is consistent with what I've been shown in my dreams, including this dream which I'm making today now. And there's kind of an illustration of the rapture there for you. So the Lord has been speaking to me now for more than 2 years about in dreams and visions about this, and to others for longer and for others for shorter times. But there are hundreds of us out there, as I've discovered when I began to look into this on YouTube, when the Lord told me to set up a YouTube channel. So this is showing how urgently we need to look, believers or non-believers, we need to look at our lives, inspect and examine our lives, our hearts, our attitudes, the way that we are living, the life that we are living. Are we really a set-apart people? Because time is up. The things that were prophesied hundreds, even thousands of years ago are coming to pass in exact and precise detail now. And the church, I'm sorry to say, God has shown me, and many others, that the church is largely asleep. If you're a Christian and you are not awake to these things, please wake up. Please reread Revelation chapters 1 to 3. You can even pause this if you like and read what the Holy Spirit says to these 7 churches in the first 3 books of Revelation. And they represent the church through time, but also I think there are aspects of this to be found in churches amongst Christians throughout the world today. But in particular, I have to say, we are in this age, the Laodicean age, where it speaks of the lukewarm church, where the church has become very, very worldly, very self-satisfied, very obsessed with prosperity, that everything should be fine and good for me personally. And God speaks very harshly of this, and he says, I will spew you out of my mouth. So please reread Revelation chapters 1 to 3 and ask yourself, where are you in this? Are you guilty of, and believe me, I've done this, and I have to do it daily. Are you guilty of lukewarmness, of loving the world, money, status, entertainment, comfort, etc. more than God? Are you compromising? Are you sexually compromised? Have you left your first love that you had for God when you first became a believer? Have you grown cold towards him? Are you full of works but have no love in your heart? Or can you really say that you were bought at a price and that you glorify God and you are no longer your own? Can you say it is no longer you that live, but the Christ that lives in you? If you're not a Christian yet, please know that God is very real and he knows you intimately and loves you personally. And this is if you're backslidden too. It's not too late. If you doubt this, you can watch my testimony video, which you can find on this channel, all the thousands of others that are out there, to hear how I rejected God, but how he chased me down and miraculously healed my broken life. To hear more warnings and explanations of where we are in history, likewise, please see past videos on this channel, or many more that other believers have put out there who are hearing the same thing from God. But though God is love, he is also holy and just, and I'm sure you get incensed at injustices and would be angry at the thought, for example, that murderers or child molesters should be allowed to get away scot-free with the crimes that they've committed. So if you're incensed, how much more Is a perfect, sinless and holy God going to be angry at these things? He demands justice for all offences which he calls sin, but so as not to have to separate us from himself forever, because he can't even look on sin, and because we ourselves cannot make right or erase what we have done. He chose to substitute himself for us, to take our punishment for us in the person of Jesus Christ, who he sent, or Yeshua HaMashiach, who he sent to a horrible execution when he was crucified, and he was innocent. So you have a choice today. Either you can invest everything you have in this current world, which is just about to pass away and is set to come under terrible judgments imminently. Please just read the whole book of Revelation if you want to have an idea of what's coming. Some of it may be difficult to understand at first, but some of it is really crystal clear, and you can understand that without any deep theological teaching. I'm going to put up some extracts. So again, I'm not going to read them. You can pause and read them for yourself. Or you can choose to acknowledge that you have failed to live up to God's perfect standards of behavior and heart motives, otherwise known as sin, and you can ask him to forgive you. You can give your life over to God completely and thereby begin a personal relationship with the most amazing person ever, the creator of everything, who loves you more passionately, perfectly and completely than anyone else ever could. And you can begin an everlasting life that will begin today here on this doomed earth, but will quickly translate into a more glorious eternity than you can ever imagine. So you can read about how the story ends in Revelation chapter 21 and 22. You can read the end of the book. We know how the book finishes. So please, please, please hear me, and please do this. I have nothing to gain at all by asking you this. You have everything to gain or everything to lose. Don't make a choice that will cost you everything. Make a beautiful choice that will cost you nothing, but will give you everything, will give you everlasting life, forgiveness, hope, life, healing, salvation, joy, security, the list goes on. And it will give you a way of escape of what is about to come. Thank you so much for watching. If you have honest questions, please ask. I will try to help. Or go to somebody you know who knows Jesus and talk to them and have them pray with you. If you need prayer and don't have anyone to ask, you can ask me. Please hear God's heart of love reaching out to you now. Please, because he is. Please respond to him. Because Jesus said, whoever comes to me, I will in no wise cast him out. God bless you.